What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode here of Crush Live Call-ins. I'm your host here, Bart Hanson, and we do this show every single Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It is January 27th, 2025. We have 5 calls up here for today. If you want to get in on the show, you can click on the link in the description, and that will get you information on how to pre-submit your hand, because you must pre-submit your hand if you want to be on this show. We are always looking for first-time callers, and CLP website subscribers will always get priority. I read all of the submissions from the CLP website subscribers, and Michael G reads all the non-subs and passes along the best ones to me. We actually had a small earthquake here this morning. I was on my computer here in my office, and I felt the monitor shake a little bit, and I was like, that's not a plane. I'm kind of into aviation, so sometimes when I hear planes like fly overhead, I have flight radar on. I knew it wasn't a plane. I checked it, and lo and behold, there was a 4.0 earthquake up near Portsmouth, New Hampshire, that I felt kind of a small piece of. It was pretty crazy. I want to follow up here too sometime during the show about the call that we had last week that we put up, I think on Saturday, about the guy that said, if you move all in, I'll call. And he was forced to call. I'm going to follow up with that because I got some information about that. But let's get going here on Monday the 27th. Shout out to everybody here in the live chat. And again, we got 5 callers here. So let's go to our first caller here. And this is going to be James. Hello, James. You are up first, sir.
Hey Bart, how's it going?
How's it going, James? And where are you playing out of?
I'm playing out of Philly Live.
Philly Live. Philly Live. Philly Live. So I assume you play at Parks as well?
I do.
Okay. So how do you decide where to go?
It depends where I'm coming from. If I'm at work, I will usually go to Philly Live because it's only 10 minutes as opposed to dealing with an hour getting out of work and dealing with rush hour traffic.
Yeah. Oh, I
Uh,
mean, but it is a smaller room, right?
Philly Live is now 30 tables as opposed to Parks, which is almost double that size.
And are the games a little bit softer on average at Philly Live?
It depends. Sometimes they can be kind of nitty, other times they can be splashy. Parks obviously runs a lot more 2.5 and above.
Okay.
So if I'm going to play strictly cash, and I'm coming from a neutral area where the drive's the same, I'll tend to go to Parks. If I'm going to play some tournaments, which I'll do from time to time, then I'll go down to Philly Live.
Well, I think there's going to be a good chance that we're going to be doing a meetup maybe in the fall in the Philadelphia area. We did one 2.5 years ago. A lot of people turned out. So look for that. And what's the size of the game that you're playing?
I'm playing 2.5. The straddle is not on at this time.
So this is a 2.5 1K cap game.
Yes, it is.
All right. So 2.5 1K, full ring, and no straddle. Okay. Start us off.
Yeah, we happen to be seven-handed at this time. I know it doesn't make a huge
Okay.
difference.
7-handed. Okay.
Um, the villain that I'm going to be playing with is only 635 effective. He just got moved to the main game that we're at probably a half hour, 45 minutes ago.
Okay. So 635 effective.
Okay. The hijack limps the cutoff, who is the main villain, raises to $10.
So hijack limps, cutoff, raises to $10. Now, that is straight out of small stakes exploits, one of the small stakes exploits. Usually when somebody raises an amount and doesn't really take into account the limps, it's usually not a strong hand. This is even a min raise anyways. I mean, this is bizarre. 1 limp and a guy just makes it min raises to 10. It wasn't a misclick, was it?
It didn't seem like a misclick, and he hasn't been doing this since he moved to the table either. He had been raising to a normal amount to like 15 or 20 without any limpers in front of him. So I did take note of that this was peculiar, and it didn't seem like he he only grabbed 2 chips by accident and threw them in there. Like he didn't leave chips behind or anything like that.
I mean, this is an extreme situation. The small stakes exploit that I always look at is like, say a couple people limp in and then somebody makes it 15 or 20 at 2.5 when that's their normal opening without limpers. It's almost never a strong hand unless somebody is trying to like goad somebody. I've seen people kind of do like the reverse tell with aces and try to goad somebody into three betting. But where are you? What position are you in?
I'm in the small blind.
Okay, so the button folds.
Button actually just calls.
Okay, button calls. Okay, and what do you have in the small blind?
I have black nines in the small blind.
Oh, sounds like a three bet all day long here.
It is, and I go to 60.
All right, so hijack limps cutoff raises, min raises to 10, button calls, hero in the small blind with 9-9 goes to 60. I mean, sure, I like that. Cutoff is the primary villain, right? Who's raising to 10?
Correct.
Okay. And you and your button were deeper?
Yeah, the hijack and button were both around 1,000, give or
Okay.
take.
So hero 3 bets to 60, okay.
Hijack folds, the cutoff calls, and the button folds.
All right, so your head's up against the min raiser, basically.
Yes.
Looks like...
And sorry, a little bit more info on the cutoff. He looked like he was in his mid-20s, a little on the nervous side, but like I said, all of his actions up until this point didn't seem too out of line.
All right, looks like the pot's about $140. Okay.
Correct. And we get a 6 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, 3 of hearts flop.
6 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, 3 of hearts. So obviously you've got an overpair here. I mean, I would say that this board really shouldn't hit him all that much. I mean, I guess there's a possibility you could have like 5, 6 suited, maybe some of the small pairs, although it is pretty bizarre for a guy to like raise it up kind of small with some of the small pairs. I mean, this is not like 7, 8, 9, by the way. I know you've got pocket nines, but these low boards aren't quite as dangerous. I think I'm betting here, but it's certainly not going to be like a spot like in a 3-bet pot where you're always checking on this particular texture anyways.
Correct, that's my thought. And I figured with the flush draw being out there, if he did have a small pair, that he'd be the type of guy to just raise me off immediately anyway. So I bet 60 again because of him being so short. I didn't think I had to go too large in order to get all the money in there, depending on the run out anyway.
So you bet 60.
Correct.
All right. So hero bets 60. I might go a little bit larger than that. I might go like maybe 80 or 90. I mean, I suppose you could bet to try to induce something too and try to get him to call with some ace highs and something like that. I'm still kind of caught up with the whole setup is a little bit strange, but okay, you bet 60.
Yeah, if he started with a full stack and he didn't do the whole min click to be in the hand, I would have gone more 2/3ish. But like I said, it is what it is. I started off with a $60 bet and he just calls.
All right, so cutoff calls, and now we are at $260. It looks like, and the cutoff probably has like just over 500, right, in the stack.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The turn card is the King of Clubs.
All right. So the turn card is the King of Clubs. Hero with 9-9. Again, it's 6-5-3. A couple diamonds. Turns the King of Clubs. That doesn't really change a whole lot here, with the exception of the fact that if he had like King X of diamonds, like he runs into like top pair. Sometimes you'll obviously see guys call this flop with like ace king. Doesn't really seem consistent that he has ace king based upon, the pre-flop stuff. So I definitely lean towards betting here again. The other thing too is that if you check, usually you're not going to see somebody start stabbing with a hand like 7-8. I feel like they're going to take a card a lot more, as opposed to if you checked a brick. Like if the board was like 7-8-3 and then the turn was a 4 and you checked and somebody had some sort of backdoor and then they decided they wanted to start a bluff. Here, a lot of people are going to check it through, because when you're the pre-flop 3-better and you 3-bet and then c-bet a ragged board and then check a king turn, I feel like you're not doing a whole lot of check folding, so it's going to get checked through a lot. So personally, I would be doing a lot of betting here again.
I ended up checking. I thought that if he happened to also have an overpair like 7s or 8s, and I bet again, he would just end up folding out here. So I wanted to give him a chance to try to start bluffing if he had some sort of draw.
I mean, sevens is a gut shot. I mean, there is something to be said that there's a possibility maybe once in a while he has a higher overpair than you. Again, it's just so hard to gauge with this really strange pre-flop setup. You decide to check, okay.
And he bets 150.
150. Wow. So the cutoff bet's 150. So if you make the call, the pot's going to be 560 and he's going to have like 350 behind?
Yeah. So I took a few seconds, but I ended up making the call.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's somewhat standard, I would say, as played. It's just interesting. He's got 350 or so left. The pot is 560. And I mean, obviously, you don't want to see a front door diamond come in. I guess there are some cards that also that bring in like one liners to straights and things like that. You know, the whole like 7-8 thing with a 9, a 4 would be a bad card. So you could see a fair amount. I mean, honestly, what you'd probably want to see is like a high blanking card that's probably not an ace either. An ace might not be the best card for you, too. So maybe like an offsuit queen, offsuit jack, offsuit 10, and maybe like a board pairing card is what I would be rooting for here as the cleanest cards.
So I do get one of those very particular cards you're talking about. I
Okay.
get the King of Spades.
King of Spades. So the final board is 6 of diamonds, 5 of diamonds, 3 of hearts. The turn is the King of Clubs. Hero check calls the turn. Again, Hero's got pocket nines, 9 of spades, 9 of clubs, no diamond in his hand. And the river here is the King of Spades. And I mean, I guess as played, I'm going to check and evaluate. I don't know. It's just kind of bizarre. Like I said, it's a little bit strange to me to expect somebody to be betting worse than you, I would say, like on the turn that you could now somehow like get value from. So I think it makes a lot of sense here to check and evaluate.
So that is what I did. I did check, and he pretty quickly jams for 365.
So cut off jams for 365. Well, I mean, the other thing too, it's not like you went super duper small on the flop. I'm just trying to think about like any King X here that doesn't have diamonds. Like if he floated somehow with like King Jack offsuit, which you'll see a lot of if you bet super small. Like if you came out and bet 30 or 40, he might actually have a lot of King X here at the end, although he'll also have a lot of other hands that he wants to start bluffing with because he's so wide. But I mean, do we agree that he's not going to, I mean, at the minimum here for value, he's probably going to have King X here, right? Like,
Yeah,
we're not going to
the
see
only thing,
Jack Jack here or 10-10.
yeah, like I said, the only thing that would suck is if he turned over 10-10. But I don't think he'd do that. The only other thing that kind of is a little dicey is if he structured it right, where you could have King X of hearts as well.
Right, some sort of King X on the backdoor side. 6-5, which would have been like top pair, top two pair. We talked about that a little bit. Gets counterfeit here. And again, like that's just a hand that I don't see necessarily get turned into a bluff all that much. The pot is going to be 925. I actually have a similar hand that I'm going to discuss on my podcast this week where an ace comes on the turn, and I had queens on a raggedy board like this in a raised pot. The river didn't pair the board, but 965, and he's jamming 3, so you're getting about 3-1 here. Yeah, I have a bad feeling about this. It kind of just seems a little bit value heavy. So again, he would have to start a bluff on a king where he's not necessarily expecting you to check fold a whole lot with like front door diamonds, or a hand like 7-8. Yeah, it's a dicey one. I could see folding here.
I did take a good 30 seconds, which I normally don't do.
Uh-huh.
But and I pretty much came to the conclusion that I didn't think he would structure with hearts just from my feeling of who he was. So it was either some sort of King of Heart or King of Diamonds type of hand, or he just started running a bluff and felt like this was his only out. So I did end up putting in the call, and just as fast as my chips went in across the line, he mucks his hand and leaves the table.
So you never found out what he had?
Never did.
Villain mucks. Oh, that's an interesting one. He might have got me to fold there. Now, John F says that I don't see a lot of King X here. 7-6, 7-7, 7-8. Maybe 7-8. I go back to the whole turn, though, where usually people don't start bluffing there in that particular spot. But you could just, I mean, another thing that I kind of washed over is it's so bizarre, the whole like pre-flop thing. Did the pre-flop thing kind of lean you towards like what's going on here? I'm just going to call and close my eyes and call.
Yeah, in part, I felt like he was more ace X diamonds heavy, and he just kind of went with it once I checked him on the turn, thinking that I'd be scared of that king.
John F said he sees 7-6, 7-7, and 7-8. Maybe some 7-8. I don't necessarily agree with the 7-6 and 7-7. It's interesting because when I first read this hand, I was like, oh, I was thinking about calling when you emailed it in a few weeks ago. But now, as I remember it, and I talked it through, now I kind of want to fold, but you ended up calling and you made a good call. Well, interesting hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bart.
All right. All right. So I think we might actually have... We might have a straggler. Who is Victoria Cristo on the Google Meet? Who is that? Victoria, who is that?
Hey Bart, can I speak?
Yeah, cool? Yeah. Who is this?
It's Justin. I'm using my girlfriend's email. I'm sorry.
No,
my
bro,
email
no.
for some reason wasn't working.
So I just want to make sure that I'm going in order here. Oh, Justin. All right, you're last.
I'm the
right?
last one. I think I'm at like 4:30. I'm just
okay.
Here.
No problem. All right, I'm gonna put you back onto mute. All right. Let's go to the next caller here, who is going to be Dylan. Dylan, I believe, was a first-time caller last week, and he has another hand. Hello, Dylan. You're up next.
Hey there. Yeah, this is my third time on the show now.
Time. Okay, third time. All right. So, yeah, where are you playing out of, Dylan, again?
Playing the same game, 7 Mile Casino in San Diego.
So this is the same thing, 2.5 1K or 1K cap?
2.5 1,500 cap.
1,500 cap. 7 Mile, which is in San Diego, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. 7 Mile in San Diego. Okay. And how deep are you?
We are 2,100 effective, and this hand has the $10 straddle on.
Okay, so it's a 2.5 plus 10 and a 1,500 cap. Occasional straddle?
This was a permanent straddle, but it's 5.5 plus 10.
5.5 plus 10, right. California 5.5 plus 10. People say, why did California do the 5.5? Well, remember I was talking about the flat drop. If they were going to drop $6 or $7 and they didn't have the small blind B2, they would take the entire pot. I mean, I am assuming that's why it's structured that way.
Probably.
Yeah. So 5.5 plus 10, 1,500 cap with 2,100 effective. Okay.
Yep. In this hand, the MP limps, low jack, ISOs to 60.
Okay.
And I'm in the cutoff with ace, queen of hearts, and 3-bet to 220.
So MP limps, low jack to 60, hero in the cutoff, ace, queen of hearts. I'm trying to figure out if that's... Is the MP like some sort of like big, like loose passive, like whaley type guy?
So I had seen this size. I saw it go limp, and this guy ISO to 60 with pocket sixes earlier in the session. And I just had to fold what I thought was, I was like, oh, if I knew that he was doing that with that kind of hand, it was like a kind of cuspy hand. And I paid attention to it, and it was pocket sixes at showdown, which I thought was very strange.
What are people normally just opening to? 30 or 40 or 35?
30 to 40, yeah.
Okay. I mean, you have a 3-bet here anyways to get the limper out. I'm just kind of, sometimes you look at, if it's a really good player if it's a good player, LoJack could just be ISOing sort of a fishy guy from MP. If it's an OMC type from MP that's going to just limp with a lot of hands, sometimes it's like skewed towards value. So you sort of have to pay attention to the setup. But you 3-bet to 210, right, with ace, queen of hearts?
220.
220. All right. Okay.
And just the LoJack calls.
All right. So the MP guy's out of there. And the LoJack calls. And you guys are away to what looks like around maybe 450 and change, something like that.
Yeah, I have that 465.
Okay, 465 and your 2,100 effective. Okay.
Yep, and the flop is good for us. It is the ace of diamonds, queen of spades, jack of clubs.
Ace of diamonds, queen of spades, jack of clubs. So you flop top 2.
Yep.
Okay.
LoJack checks, and I decide to size pretty small on this board. I bet 110.
So 110. So what is your reasoning for sizing small?
I think one, it's just an amazing board for my range, so I'm probably betting everything. And I have the board I have a lot of blockers to his strong hands, so I kind of have it crushed. So I just sized down because I think there are less hands to call. Well, I don't know if that's right.
Well, I was just kind of thinking because I mean, even if he had, let's say he's got a pair like 9-9 and below, does he even call the 110? I mean, I don't think he can call the 110. So the I guess the case could be made is that if you were to take somewhat of a larger sizing and he started folding out like Queen 10, Jack 10, King Jack types of hands, I could see a case for the smaller sizing. But in reality, those hands probably don't fold pair plus gut shot. He's not going to fold an ace. So whenever I take a look at a board where there's just portions of his range where the guy just can't call any bet. This is a pretty good example, right? Like 9s and below. And then you have another portion, which is going to be ace X or Broadway types of holdings, and you beat all the 2 pairs, but just Broadway types of holdings that will call a larger bet. That's sometimes when I'll start to take kind of a little bit of a larger sizing. I just don't know if 110 necessarily like is the most efficient for what we are trying to necessarily accomplish, like off the top of my head. Again, if you start taking a larger sizing and then pair plus straight draws, things like Jack 10 and King Jack just kind of fold out, you could make a case for this. But okay, you go 110.
Yeah. Do you think it would be better to size, like take this size with like ace ace and then size up with like queen queen and jack jack?
Well,
or
yeah.
king 10?
I mean that's always whenever you block like having like a top pair type of hand, then sure. Again, it's still though. Yeah, but I mean, if you wanted to like say, all right, I've got like most of the aces and I want like the pair plus gut shots to call, specifically those types of holdings, that would make a little bit more sense. But I would almost always size a little bit larger if I had like Jack Jack or Queen Queen or something like that. Even Queen Jack, right? Too, like unblocking the ace. And then sometimes on these types of boards also too, you might actually take a small sizing with ace X for the same reasons as having like ace ace, right? So if you have ace ace and you have the board covered and you're targeting the pair plus gut shots, but then if you had 3-bet him with like ace 4, ace 5, you block top pair, but then also you don't like, you're losing to the other aces, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but okay, so you go 110.
And he calls.
All right.
And the turn is the 5 of diamonds.
So 220, 685, and now the turn is the 5 of diamonds.
Yep.
So it's ace of diamonds, queen of spades, jack of clubs, rainbow flop. Turn is the 5 of diamonds, brings out a backdoor flush draw. Again, backdoor flush draw hand reading. Go back to the flop texture, look at the cards on the board. Queen X of diamonds and jack X of diamonds available, not ace X of diamonds. But we know that to your sizing, if he does have Queen X or Jack X of diamonds, he's in there, right? Like he arrives on the turn with these hands. Okay.
So on this turn, exactly because of the backdoor flush draw, I think if it's an offsuit 5, I'll probably stay pretty small. But with the backdoor flush draw, I decide to size up to 450.
So check.
Yeah, check.
Hero bets 450. And by the way, too, it's not like he can't have ace king here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if he decides to not 4-bet ace king, you got ace king off. That's not always going to be a 4-bet with nobody in between. Even when you take the smaller sizing, if I have ace king, I'm probably not doing a whole lot of check raising. So he can still have ace king here as well. You decide to bet 450 now, which is about 2/3 the size of the pot.
And he calls.
All right. Call. Well, now the pot's going to be 1585. You guys have put in 560, just under 800. So you probably have 1,300 and change left. The pot's 1585. What do you think his range is here? Getting to the river.
I think it's a lot of ace X. I think it's some queen X and jack X of diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
I think
he's not going to have king queen off. King queen no diamonds here for them. Probably not, right?
It shouldn't be. I don't think he has like jack 10 of spades anymore.
Right.
Or
any of those
queen.
Right.
Yeah.
Any of those pair plus straight draws that don't have the diamonds.
Yeah.
And the great thing about you having ace queen is you don't have to worry about any ace X, right? You're ahead of ace jack and ace 5. Like you could start to say, you start to think about if you took the sizing with ace king, could it start to be somewhat of an overplay? And if you took this sizing with ace king, you couldn't comfortably value bet across for large sizing across many rivers. I wouldn't say here you can.
Yeah, if I had ace king, I'm probably checking back most rivers.
If you took this turn sizing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also don't think he has king 10 anymore. I don't think he has the straight anymore or probably not on the flop because I mean he's probably check raising that on the flop. I hope.
Mm-hmm. Now the interesting part of the if for some reason we were your opponent from out of position, the combo of king 10 to slow play here, if we didn't check raise flop, would be king 10 of diamonds.
Yeah.
I think when you start to take this size, if I did arrive here somehow with king 10 and king 10 of diamonds, I very well might just call turn if I thought my opponent was good. And the reason why king 10 of diamonds is better is just because there's less of a chance a diamond comes, even though it would give us the nuts, but to scare you. Yeah. And then we've got the interior scare card blocking cards. So less of a chance that a king or a 10 comes, and then more of a chance that a clean river comes. That's some of the stuff you don't really have to start to think about all that much towards the higher stakes of having some really strong hands to get to rivers. So people can't just liberally barrel you off. But anyways, ace of diamonds, queen of spades, jack of clubs, 5 of diamonds. Okay.
And the river is a card that I didn't like at first, but I thought a little bit about it. It was the jack of hearts.
The jack of hearts. The jack of hearts. So ace of diamonds, queen of spades, jack of clubs. Turn is the 5 of diamonds. And the river is the jack of hearts. The reason why that is not the cleanest card in the world is because part of this guy's range is jack X of diamonds arriving here at the end, right?
Yeah.
Now that would probably be in the form of jack 10 of diamonds, king jack of diamonds. I suppose it could also be queen jack of diamonds that didn't check raise flop. If you were to take this sizing on turn, that's just bottom 2 with, it's bottom 2 with a flush draw. Some people would raise at some point with those types of holdings. I don't know if he's ever in there with like jack 9 suited or something like that. But even if he ran into jack X of diamonds here, a lot of times he's going to check at the end anyways. And then if that happens, we obviously have a decision to make. Well, first of all, what happened on the river? Did he bet?
He checks.
Okay, he checks. Let me ask you this question. What would you have done if he bet?
I mean, it probably depends on the sizing.
Yeah, depends on the.
If it's all in, like he lead jams for 1300, I might have to make a fold.
Yeah, that's a crazy one, right? I mean, he really you have pocket queen. If he ran into jack X, you've got pocket queens and pocket aces. But that's that would be a crazy one because then you'd be like, what am I trying? I'm trying to find a bluff here.
He would have to be turning like
queen X into a bluff.
Into a bluff, and I just don't see that happening for most.
Yeah,
this guy wasn't like super good.
Yeah.
So yeah, he checks.
So he makes a check. Someone's saying ace jack also. Ace jack is actually one that we did. Let's take a look. Are there ace jack suited combos available? So we're looking at, there's the jack of clubs and the jack of hearts on the board. The ace of diamonds is on the board. So there appears to be ace jack of spades that's available. That's one other hand that you lose to here, by the way, too, which is ace jack of spades. What's funny about ace jack is it doesn't really... The only thing that changes is that that's better, obviously slightly better than having jack X of diamonds, is that it blocks you having pocket aces. Mm-hmm. It still loses to pocket queens and pocket aces, but he checks. So this is a more interesting one because the question is, all right, do you want to value bet, and what is the size here that you're going to value bet? Now, a couple of things on here on ace, queen, jack, 5, jack. I think it's still a pretty tough, like if you jam here, it's still a pretty tough call for ace king. And the problem here is like the other like ace X types of holdings, like say he's got ace 10 or somehow he's sticking around with a suited ace 9 suited, or God forbid ace 5, which now gets counterfeit. All of those hands don't play the board like they play the queen as the kicker now, which usually means people are a little bit less likely, I think, sometimes to call. So how much do you have left in your stack exactly?
1320.
I do wonder. Here's the thing. if the player is a sort of if I was playing against a bad sort of, losing player at 2-5, even with this type of structure, I would look at it almost like a free roll bet in the sense that, well, I'm gonna value own myself some of the time against Jack X, but if I feel like he's always calling with Ace King, and sometimes he'll even call with like Ace X, like if you're like a young whippersnapper, or something like that, I could definitely see jamming all in for value. As the player ability goes up and you start to get folds sometimes from Ace King here, and you start to not get the calls from the Ace X that doesn't play, you can make a case for a smaller bet. Remember, you still have like a full stack left. You could bet something like 500, something like that.
Yeah. In retrospect, that's what I wish I had done, because I think you're right. I think Ace King probably... I think Ace King calls it jam. I don't think that Ace 10 does, or like Ace 9 or something like that, or Ace 5.
Yeah.
But I think those will call like 500.
This kind of, I don't know the answer to this. Again, it just, I don't dabble into the solver world all that much, although it is kind of one of my New Year resolutions. I want to incorporate a little bit more. I don't know about the whole structure of the sizing, but it almost seems to me like if you get to this river and you jam here, from a theoretical perspective, you might make Ace King indifferent. It might be really close. I could be wrong about that. Ace King could be a square call. But I do think depending on the player ability, the worse the player, the more I'll bet, the larger I'll bet. The better the player, the more I want to bet for a smaller sizing. What did you end up doing?
I ended up moving all in. And I don't think it's a huge mistake. If it is a mistake at all.
Is your opponent like a winning player or?
Oh no, he's very bad.
Okay, well, if he's very bad, then I'm with you. If he's very bad, I'm with you. We ran through. So you're saying you probably wouldn't have made this bet if he was better, break even.
If he was slightly better, if he was somebody I respected at the table more, I'd probably be betting 500.
Okay,
and
I'm on board with you. And this is where actually live poker is kind of fun in terms of like really like maximizing your win rate, is that the lines might be different depending on the player ability, especially here at the end for this type of sizing. If he's bad, I don't have a problem with your bet because I don't think, like I said, I don't think Ace King's folding.
Yeah.
All right, so you move all in.
Yeah, and he probably gets his chips in faster than I can put them out. And so, no good.
If you get snap called here, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You're in trouble.
He turns over pocket queens.
Pocket queens. Wow.
Yeah.
And villain. So the low jack has queen. What's interesting here, how I was talking about like if I was your villain and had king 10 of diamonds, it's like pretty nice hand to slow play. This one's not really a great hand to slow play. I'm actually kind of surprised. I mean, he risks a lot by slow playing this down to the end.
I think especially on the turn with
that's
the flush draw coming out there.
On the turn, he risks a lot of by. Now, with that being said, who knows? Like you might against this guy, like just bet fold Ace King, like all day long. I don't know if he knows that, but no. Anyways, that's a good one, Dylan.
Yeah, icing on the cake was he immediately got up and left, so that was real fun.
Oh, he got up and left. Thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it. People saying I'm not moving all in here. Nate, of course, blueprint. But I will say though, Nate, you wouldn't move all in against a bad player. I think that's the key. The key is if I think it's a pretty big losing player, I don't mind the all in. In other types of situations, I think all in might be a slight overplay. But thank you very much for the call, Dylan. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Let's move along here to... And we're going to put Mark on hold, but this is going to be Matt B who's up third. Hello, Matt. You are up next, sir.
How's it going, Bart?
Hey, how's it going, Matt? Where are you playing out of?
I'm playing a private game in New York.
New York City?
Yes.
Matt, I will say that obviously Crush Live Poker has been around. I mean, we started doing a subscription training site in 2012, and it was called Seed Open Poker. And then we changed the name in 2014 to Crush Live Poker. So back in the beginning when the company was smaller, I really used to get into the weeds with some of the stuff that I now have other people help me with. But your name, I definitely recognize your name as a longtime subscriber. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty young. I'm only 24, but yeah, I've been watching since probably I was around 15, 16, maybe 17.
But you
yeah.
were like a website subscriber back in the day almost too, right?
I believe so, on
Yeah,
and off.
On and
yeah.
off. Okay.
Um,
I just remember I Matt.
yeah, well, we met out in Vegas playing the Big O tournament.
Are you the dude that took like third place in the 1500?
Yeah, second place.
Oh, okay. Okay. You took second place in the 1500 Big O, right? This summer or was that last
yeah,
summer?
yeah. This summer.
Oh,
yeah.
that's right. And then we played in the 10K together a little bit too. Did you play the 10K?
I did play the 10K.
Yeah.
It was great. We played the cash games over in Vegas, which were pretty great.
We
I
played
thought.
the double board. Right. You were like the youngest guy, like in that tournament.
The Big O, yeah.
Yeah.
Big O.
Yeah. In the double board, because split pot big bet games is starting to not be an old man's game, but I do remember that, Matt. Yeah, that was congratulations too on that second place win. The WSOP has not come out with their schedule yet, but I always want to hit up the 10K Big O. I love the 1500 Mixed O 8 event, although I'm going to be out there for far less time this summer and then the main. All right, so what's the game you're playing in here?
Yeah, so it's a 10-quarter game. I'm 3.7K effective with the main villain,
1020
who has me covered.
1025. You said 3750?
3,700 effective.
3700 effective. Do they ever play any like high-low pot limit games in private? Is it all no limit in New York City?
Oh, I
PLO?
couldn't tell you. Honestly, I mean, I didn't have a lot of experience playing Big O. I just,
yeah, course.
hopped in. I mean, I've everything I've watched was, on Crush Live Poker,
Yeah.
which has some great content for Big O. I recommend everyone checking it out. It's a great game.
So 10 and a quarter, 3,700 effective, no straddle, just straight 1025.
1025 for this hand, yeah. So
Okay.
Under the Gun 2,
Uh-huh.
he's a very aggressive younger guy. He opens to 100. The cutoff, or the hijack, sorry. He likes to get in there. He's very aggressive as well. He calls 100. I'm in the cutoff with Ace of Hearts, Queen of Clubs, and I make it 450.
Ace, so hero in the cutoff.
Yep.
Ace Hearts, Queen of Clubs, back to back. Hero in the cutoff, the Ace Hearts, Queen of Clubs, 3 bets to 450. Back to back Ace Queens from the cutoff. Plus 2 raise to 100. Hijack calls. 100, by the way, is just 4x, right? And 10 and a quarter.
Yeah,
It's not crazy.
4x.
All right, so you 3 bet to 450. Okay.
Yep, and both players call.
All right, so
So
plus
it's 3 ways.
2 and the hijack call. Are these guys rec players or?
I wouldn't say, they're extreme battlers. They're
Okay.
in there to play
battle.
aggressive, have a good time.
Mhm.
They're very competent in poker. Played a lot of poker.
Okay.
Probably more than me.
And maybe at these stakes too. Maybe the stakes don't bother them.
It doesn't really matter. The money really doesn't matter to either of these players.
All
as
right.
well.
So
Look at all.
about 1375 in there, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the flop comes Ace of Spades, 9 of Spades, 7 of Spades.
Ace of Spades, 9 of Spades, 7 of Spades. Hero with Ace of Hearts, Queen of Clubs. Monotone board in a 3-bet pot. Okay.
Yeah. So it checks to me, and I decide to bet 200.
200.
Yeah.
Are you trying to induce somebody to do something here? Or are you just doing this out of respect of this board?
It is a weird spot where, they're going to have, because everyone's playing pretty loose, including myself in the spot. So they're going to have a lot of 7s and 9s as well. A lot of like 10 of Spades, King, potentially.
I mean, I tend to agree with I tend to agree here with a smaller sizing for sure on a monotone board. I just don't know if I would go necessarily this small. When I was thinking about smaller sizing, I was probably more thinking about like 400 or something like that.
Yeah.
The only thing about this type of sizing, again, is that, and I'm not saying that it's necessarily wrong. It's just one of these things where sometimes in live poker where you have guys that call far too much and don't raise enough, which makes it very easy to play. When you use some very, very small sizing, you get into a situation where you open up a situation where players might raise where they wouldn't normally raise. That in itself is not bad, but they're still going to also have hands that beat you when they're going to raise as well. So sometimes you're playing in a guessing game some of the time too. Now you are in position as well, but that was just something to be said. All right, so you bet 200.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
I get raised just countless times when I do this, and that's exactly what happens. And the under the gun too, he raises to 500.
So not that big.
Yeah, effectively a min raise to a very small size on the flop, and the hijack decides to fold.
All right, so hijack folds. You know what would be fun? So I'll talk through this really quick. So your size is so small here. This is exactly what I'm talking about. But you do have position. You might see like an ace X here raise that wouldn't normally raise if you had gone like 350 to 400 because of the small sizing. So, but of course you do have position and you can continue on with the hand. I just thought it would have been interesting if you bet 200 under the gun, made it 500, and then the hijack called. Because normally, again, if you use somewhat of a normal sizing and it went, you bet 400, check raise, call, you just fold, right, without a spade. But
Exactly.
if it's 200 and the guy calls, it would have been interesting. But we didn't get that. So under the gun, check raise to 500, hijack fold, and I assume you call.
Yeah, there's no decision there. That's definitely not why I was calling it.
No. So 2375 now to the turn, and you guys have right around 2,700 left in your stack, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or about
27?
3,100. No, you're right. About 27.
Yeah, 27. Okay.
Yeah, so the turn's a 3 of hearts, and I kind of expected him to bet a lot. Obviously, I thought you were right. He can have some lower aces, and then some king of spades bluffs, even some like 9x or 7x that just decided to bluff as well.
Well, I mean, you said that these guys love to battle, and that they're not scared of putting money in, which is actually going to make this spot a little bit tougher to play, because I'm just going to on a parallel, if it wasn't that type of player and it was more of a guy, just an average player, or just your typical player, if you use this type of sizing, you might get raised, but you would really get what I like to call almost like a truth serum street here, where you'd almost be able to suss out the guy's strength based upon what he does here on the turn, whether it's a check or, again, like that same bet or less, or something that's kind of small. It was very, very indicative. I'm not huge on live tells, but these betting patterns are very, very indicative and have been consistent through the years. This doesn't sound like that type of player. He might put a bunch of money in anyways, but I'm just saying it's the typical guy that a lot of our viewers will watch. You get a lot of information by the bet sizing that might come on the turn on a pure brick, and this is a pure brick for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree. I thought he was going to bet the turn a lot. He's going to have a lot of, polarizing hands. But he does decide to check, and he checks fairly quickly.
Interesting. So the hijack, under the gun checks. So if you had ace queen with the queen of spades in your hand, I'm assuming, at least from my perspective, this would be I think a more easy decision for me here on the turn, where I would be comfortable checking behind a fair amount if I had ace queen with the queen of spades. Mm-hmm. Here, with no spade in your hand, it's a situation where if you check behind, you might let off, kind of like a free card. The whole check raise flop, it's just weird, because it's like, if you bet here, you very well might open yourself up again to a check raise. And I think that one of the older school thoughts was that you always need to know what you're going to do. Like, if you bet, you always need to know before you bet how you're going to react to a raise. I disagree with that almost entirely, because there are some situations where it's so infrequent that you're going to get raised. There's no need to even mentally think about it. Here, though, if I were to bet, I would probably try to plan on knowing what I'm going to do to a raise, knowing that that's a fairly large possibility.
Yeah, I think I probably would have called, given how aggressive he is, and he loves to just really put you to the test, and he's looking to either lose a lot or win a lot, which I totally respect. But I'm in there battling with him, so yeah, I probably would have called, but I think on the turn I might have made a mistake. I only bet 400.
I mean, you guys have just over a pot size bet left. 400 into 2,400, basically. Yep. So I mean, he's going to get any price, right? I mean, I suppose you could make a case that you're trying not to scare an ace X away that doesn't have a spade. Maybe.
Yeah, I want him to fold like a 9 or a 7 is really what I'm targeting, or like a lower ace. I think a lower ace is sort of forced to call.
Well, you don't want him to fold a lower ace if he doesn't have a spade.
Yeah,
right?
I think he is forced to call with a lower ace,
right.
And I think a 9 or a 7 is kind of probably forced to fold, or he could just go all in, and I was probably going to call him.
Well, I was going to say, are you partially trying to induce here too?
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, again, the funny thing about this is that I'm not saying these small sizes are wrong. They can put you into more difficult decisions on the flop. We talked about that. And then here on the turn, where if you bet 1/6 of the pot on the turn, you're going to face just by default more of a raising frequency as opposed to betting 600 or 700. But if you're prepared to bet call, then you want to take the size that is, the most efficient here. If you bet 400 and he calls, the pot's going to be just under 3,200. You guys are going to have, 2,300 left. I assume if he just check calls the turn and the river's a brick and he checks to you, that you're going to be doing a lot of checking behind, or might you actually go for value with ace queen at the end? Like if the 3 pairs or something like that.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the player and like their perception of you, and if you're capable of bluffing in this spot.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like even pre-flop, I'm gonna be 3-betting like a ton here. Even like some 10-9 suited, some king-6 suited, maybe some king-queen offsuit that I'll have with a spade. So I'm definitely going to be capable of bluffing, but I don't know if he's going to know that. So it's sort of like maybe a Fifth Street chicken sort of situation where I'm the one betting,
So you bet 400.
Yep. And he makes the call.
Okay. So UTG calls. So now the pot is 3,175 and you guys have just around 2,700 left. Okay.
Yep. Now the river is the 8 of spades.
The 8 of spades.
Yep.
So the 4th spade comes out now.
Yes, which is definitely unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
And then in less than a second, he's going to go all in.
He goes all in?
Yep.
Wow.
It's about 2,500, 2,400, 2,500, I want to say. So
UTG goes all in. Now, for a less experienced player, and for a lot of you guys who are viewing this, I just want you to take a pause, because I know the gut initial reaction here is like, trivial fold. How can he call? But I can almost bet that Matt is probably going to be thinking the same thing that I'm going to talk through here, which is I find this very, very surprising, because this type of bet is saying the guy has the king of spades. He's not going to be making this bet with the queen of spades as a snap all in. If you agree with me with that little live node lock, then you go back and you're like, how does this guy have the king of spades? Like, how often does he have the king of spades here? Does he make this play with king queen off with the king of spades, or some sort of offsuit king X hand with the king of spades, like king jack off and king 10 off? He check raised the flop. Is he not continuing with a bet, or is he just check calling the turn? There's that question. And then if he had like ace king with the king of spades, does this hand go down like this, where he check raises flop and then checks the turn? You could make a case, though, Matt, of saying that he, I suppose, could have the naked king of spades here, and then once you call the check raise, he's just sort of taking his equity. It sounds to me like this is the type of guy that might call with like king, queen, king, jack off. I mean, that's another thing to look at too. Pre, or is he not? Does he play like fundamentally well?
Exactly. That's sort of the question. I figured he's going to maybe have like half the time King Jack offsuit and every time King Queen offsuit. We're just playing pretty loose, all of us, and the guy behind is going to call even looser. So King Queen off, he gets the other guy to call behind with King Jack.
I mean, my other question here though is that if he doesn't have the King of Spades, right, and he's bluffing, he still check called your turn bet. So you're just saying that he's turning a weaker ace into a bluff here?
Exactly. He would have to turn a weaker ace into a bluff, or just have absolutely nothing and just call me hoping the spade comes on the river. But that's obviously just way too ambitious. I don't think he's doing that. I also don't think he's ever going to have ace king offsuit. He's always going to 4-bet that pre-flop.
Well, and this is why like the bet in itself is probably talking about theory. I mean, it's hard to think about this from a theory perspective. I can't see how this bet can ever be correct by him with any holding. Excuse me. I don't think I'm ever making a $2,400 bet here with a 4 flush out here with the King of Spades. The way that this one went down, it's just, unless like somehow like I'm thinking you're going to call without a spade in your hand, or it just seems bizarre to me to make an all-in bet here on a 4 flush. Remember, with the King of Spades when either player can have the King of Spades. So that in itself is a little bit strange to me. I would think that the bet size should be more like half, like 40% to half from this guy from up front. So
yeah, that makes sense. Just expecting me to check back with a bunch of things that aren't, it's either I'm going to be bluffing or I'm going to have either the king or queen of spades, probably. Yeah, I'm going to bet the river for value.
I mean, there's a couple other small things out here. Some people saying that there are straight flushes out here. Yes, there are straight flushes out here, but the straight flushes flop the flush. Jack 10 of spades and 5 6 of spades. I mean, they flop the flush. They're going to check raise the flop and then check call turn. I mean, I hate when you're in one of these spots. The other thing too is when I get into a spot like this, I want to make sure I don't accidentally lose to something. You don't have 2 pair, so it just sucks to act. I can't imagine he would ever do this with a low spade and you accidentally lose to a low spade. It would suck if you somehow accidentally lose to 2 pair. Sometimes when I get into these spots, if I can find hands where I'm accidentally losing to something and it's really close, it leans me towards a fold. So I'm going to sort of defer to, game flowing. I think it's a lot closer than people think, like on the surface. I mean, I suppose I could see calling here. It is a little bit bizarre, the sizing at the end, I have to say.
Yeah. I think once he jams within a second, I know you're not very into live tells, but that's sort of the one tell that you like when the board changes. And I've made a lot of money so far playing poker where the board changes and someone goes all in right away. And they're typically bluffing maybe a little bit more than they would. But what happens is really insane. And the player actually lets me see one of his cards.
He turns it over, or he says you get to choose one?
He says I get to choose one card.
Oh.
Yeah.
So he gives you an option to choose one card.
Yep.
Wow, that's really something on a 4 flush board. That is like, how can you do that on a 4 flush board when you're just like, it's probably not smart for all you guys out there that ever played this game. When you're representing polarization, like with the true nuts, and in a situation like this on a 4 flush, this probably isn't the time to allow somebody to choose one card. It's probably not the best time.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to he's done this before and it works against a lot of people. He's looking to put people to the test and, it works a ton for him because people just don't want to call off their stack with a hand like this.
All right. So you choose one card. The card that would be, well, besides you picking the King of Spades here, right? I guess I wouldn't want to see like an offsuit queen or jack. That would make sense that he would have the King of Spades. What did you end up choosing?
Right. I did see an offsuit jack. Yeah. But I just thought it would be so sick if he had the King of Spades because he would just be gambling that I didn't.
So Hero gets to pick a card and picks the offsuit jack, Jack X. So now you're down to him having ace jack, right? Ace jack or what? King jack of spades. I mean, Jack 10 no spade is a gut shot. That just doesn't make any sense on a monotone board. Jack 10 no, and then make a straight on a 4 flush and jam for 2,400. Can you imagine? That would be, Matt. That'd be a real horror show if you call here and he shows like Jack 10 no spade somehow and you lose to a straight. I mean, yeah, that's interesting. All right, so what did you end up doing?
Yeah, I did call. I was gonna call anyways.
All right, your call.
I was very close to calling, and I think that's sort of why he let me see a card. It could have been sort of like a desperation.
Yeah.
To try and win the pot.
Yeah.
And he just had ace jack offsuit.
Ace jack off.
Yeah, no spade.
Again, for him, that's not really a smart move. Because here's the thing, the other thing too. Say you picked the ace, right?
Yeah.
The thing, like you had said, if you know he always is going to 4-bet here with ace king, then you know he doesn't have ace king of spades, right? Ace king with the king of spades. If you pick the ace,
he never has ace king with the king of spades. So if I saw the ace, I was going to call right away.
Right, unless somehow like he had 2 pair, and that would be weird though too. Because why would he let you show 1? Yeah, I mean the ace is almost better for you than the jack, right? To pick.
Yeah, the only thing I wouldn't want to see was an offsuit queen. I think would be the only one that would scare me a little bit. But again, he would have to. You know, if I just picked up the king of spades, then I have a easy fold. So,
yeah,
he had to be pretty sure I was going to call. And I was going to call. Mm-hmm. So, honestly, it wasn't obviously like no one should do this on a 4 flush board, even a 3 flush board, of course.
Right.
Or no one should really do this, period. But
and the problem too with it never really makes a whole lot of sense for. If you're ever in this situation in Matt's opponent's situation, where Matt's opponent, we check raise the flop and then Matt bet calls the flop. So now Matt has a range of bet calling the flop. We have ace jack off with no spade. Matt's range is going to be, as the 3-better, hands with a spade in it, a big ace like he had, I don't know, maybe some sets or stuff like that. So like when the flush card comes and we have ace jack, it's not really a great time to like turn that into a bluff. Because Matt's going to have a spade here sometimes too. So anyways, Thank you for the call, Matt. I appreciate it.
Of course, Bart.
All right.
Hope to be on sometime soon.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, let's move along here to the 4th caller. And this is going to be Mark. Hello, Mark. You're up next.
Afternoon, Bart. How you doing?
How you doing, Mark? Where are you played out of?
Living the dream. Playing out of Las Vegas, the Wynn Encore.
The Wynn Encore in Las Vegas. And did they had somewhat recently changed their buy-in structure or something like that? Is that right?
Yeah, actually, when I set in the hand, I did make one minor error. I had said 9-handed. It was at the first of the year that they switched the 2-5 game down to 8-handed. So that's the most recent change. I actually called in last year and we talked about how they changed the 5-10 structure to the 5-10 big blind ante, no straddle.
Mm-hmm. Is it a 1,200 buy-in in this game or something?
1,500.
1,500. Okay, 1,500. Okay. I think this is where my friend Tony S. CV, CLP subscriber, plays a lot of his sessions. He was out there in Vegas. All right, so 2-5, 1,500. Okay, 8-handed. How deep are you?
Yes, and we are 1,500 effective. Okay. This isn't going to be a multi-way pot. Everybody in the pot has somewhere between 1,400 and 1,800-ish. The game had maybe been open for maybe an hour and a half or so.
Okay. So 1,400 to 1,800 stacks. Okay.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
So starts off under the gun, who is the deepest, who's probably got 1,900, opens up to 20. Middle position, who is probably a more passive recreational player, flats, hijack flats, cutoff flats, and it goes to me in the big blind, and I have 7 of hearts, 7 of spades.
And you call?
Yeah, and I complete there.
What is the minimum pair that you're going to squeeze there with so multi-way?
With the action, again, the under the gun player is a competent winning not a reg, but he's a thinking player. I've seen him play a bunch of hands already. I've played with him, I think earlier in the week or something like that. I'm probably looking at a 3-bet at 9s plus, king queen suited, some occasional 6-7 suited, something along those lines.
So here's the thing that I would say is that it's interesting because depending on the stack sizes might depend on how I would comprise of a squeeze here, in the sense that, like, a lot of times when there's so much dead money out here, all of these other guys have somewhat collapsed ranges, unless you start to notice that some people are calling with some strong hands. And if you squeeze here out of the big blind, when you can call with a lot of the in-between hands, it puts a lot of pressure. It's almost like the tightest configuration for the under the gun to continue. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying to squeeze 7-7, but what I'm saying is that if you 3-bet here, you can easily make a case that under the gun is supposed to fold ace queen off here. With that being said, I still would almost favor squeezing suited broadways and the big ace-x types of holdings, as opposed to when you start to get down to like 6s and 7s here, just because of the fact of the barreling equity later on. That's why I think it depends on stack sizes and things like that. But you say 9-9, I think that's perfectly reasonable. You could make a case, though, that this could be somewhat of a profitable squeeze going down to maybe 8-8 or 7-7. But okay, so we go 5 ways to the flop at $100, right?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And the flop comes out ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, deuce of diamonds.
Ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, deuce of diamonds. It's funny. I don't know if he's joking. Dylan, the previous caller, said deuce plus for sure. The thing about having, if you ever do start to squeeze, well, deuce would be nice on this board, right? If you're going to squeeze any pair, what you have to understand is you have to start running 3 street bluffs with the low pairs that you don't flop sets with, like deuces through 4s and 5s and things like that. There's a lot of people don't have that in their arsenal. Anyways, it's ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, deuce of diamonds. You have 7 of hearts, 7 of spades. Okay.
Yeah, and just, for perspective, of course we are going to have a call here, but I had pretty much given up on the hand
Sure.
at that point in terms of with it being so multi-way.
Sure.
And then even thinking about, I looked at it, I really only have one semi-clean out in terms of hitting anything. That's
You can't call any bet from any player.
Oh, of course. No, that's no question. I'm not no consideration of calling a bet.
Yeah.
But of course I check, and action does end up checking around.
All right, so it gets checked around. So it remains 100. So MP under the gun does not bet. And just because you said under the gun might be a thinking player, there's a lot. I even read on Reddit. I read a thread on Reddit. Reddit is, by the way, my new 2+. I haven't been on 2+2. People, hopefully somebody will cut this and put it on Reddit. But Reddit is, I enjoy it. Reddit poker/poker. I used to enjoy 2+2. I haven't been on 2+2 in, it seems like, months, approaching a year. It's pure garbage. But I enjoy some of the Reddit threads. It's not heavily strategy, but what I was going to say is I even read on Reddit, a guy had written a guide to beating the low stakes. And, he had some stuff in there that was good. But one of the things that he said, which I vehemently disagree with, is checking range OOP multi-way from up front. Checking range. Now, you can check sometimes, but I think it leaves a lot of value on the table. The only reason why I bring that up is just because under the gun doesn't bet here, it does not mean he doesn't have an ace this multi-way. That's all.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree with that. And we get the 7 of clubs on the turn.
So 7 of clubs. How did I know that was coming, or we wouldn't have a call, right? So you get the free card, and now you turn a set.
Yep.
And now the question is, how should we play it? So we know that just because under the gun checked doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't have an ace in this particular spot. So there's front door diamonds out there, and now there's backdoor clubs. What I will say, though, is that more likely than not, when MP hijack and cutoff check, I suppose somebody could have like a weak ace here, but if everybody's playing straightforward and betting their hands, the fact that they've checked after the preflop raiser usually leans them towards not really having an ace. So when everyone really hasn't bet, and this is why it's important for positional sort of awareness, because they've checked to the left of the under the gun guy, and it doesn't appear like their hands are strong. Either they don't have an ace or it's like a weak ace. I tend to just come out and bet here when people sort of have announced that they're not all that strong, because if you go for a tricky check raise, they might not bet and call, or it might just get sort of checked through a lot. Whereas if this guy who's the preflop raiser had sort of like ISO'd, like limpers, and then people checked to him naturally on the flop, you wouldn't know that those guys from up front didn't have an ace, because they were checking to the guy, checking to the raiser. But here, the raiser acted first. These guys checked after him. So there's a case for just leading out here, because you're just going to get called. Like it's not a whole lot of strong hands that are going on. With that being said, though, we already said that the under the gun guy, he could just be checking a lot of hands here. It is a double flush draw board. So if you did want to go for a check raise here, people very well might convince themselves that you might be making a play with a combo draw, as opposed to a board that was like ace 9 deuce 7 rainbow, where they might find less. So I could see going either way with it. I could see coming out and betting. I could also see at this stacked up going for a check raise.
Yeah, and that was the really the part that I was considering is, if I go for a lead right now with the action behind the under the gun raiser, the 3 field callers, I can see a lot more flush draw. Someone hit the backdoor flush draw, possibly even a combo draw. It would be Jack 10 in that case, that just picked up additional equity. So I was looking at that versus if I go for a check raise, how many people, like you just said, how many people are going to hold on at that point? Because that's either way, I think it looks fairly strong with either of those actions.
I mean, the case for going lead is you get 2 calls as opposed, you might get, and another thing too about the draw heavy boards is you might get two streets of somebody calling you with a bluff catching hand. Whereas if you check, it might get checked through again, or once you start to check raise, now all of a sudden you actually might make more money by just going lead. But again, the more I think about this, the more I do like a lead, though, because the 3 people behind the preflop raiser checked. And again, if the preflop raiser was in position and everyone had naturally checked to him, then you could probably go for a check raise more often. Did you bet here?
No, I opted for the check.
Okay.
And under the gun now checks again.
I mean, that would tend to imagine now that, if under the gun is quote unquote checking range here, I think at some point he's got to bet, right? Some of his good aces off here. You would think, right? I mean, he's just going to check his life away with like ace, king, ace, queen. I mean, the 7 doesn't really connect with anything with the exception of like somebody having ace 7 suited that was checked, or like 9-7. Like it puts another draw out there, right?
Exactly.
So, okay, under the gun checks. Yeah.
And at this point, middle position, that's 35.
All right, so 35.
Third pot.
Yeah.
Hijack calls. And now the cutoff calls.
Oh, wow. So hijack calls, cutoff calls. So MP bets 35, hijack calls, cutoff calls. I mean, the pot's 200. I mean, at this point, you have to raise now, right?
Yes.
By the way, too, I mean, this was the other thing, too, where I sometimes talk about these situations where I will, in a little bit of an unbalanced way, depending on what I want to accomplish, will lead with my strong value hands like your hand. And then if I had a hand like, say, like 8-6 of diamonds, 8-10 of clubs, I'll go for a check raise to add like max fold equity too, or have it get checked through, which is not the worst thing in the world with my draws, right? But here, I think you have to raise. Send in the nukes. Are you asking me what my sizing should be?
Yeah, what would you do in terms of the sizing on a check raise if you're taking this line?
Well, I remember there's still a bunch of draws out there too. I mean, the pot is 200, so if you wanted to make a pot size raise, it would be something like 270, right? 35, 200. Yeah, it would probably be like 270, 275. I might make it like 200 to 225, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe
Okay,
larger. Maybe larger.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on how nitty. I mean, is the game real nitty?
No, that's what like I mentioned before. Basically, the under the gun player, as I mentioned, was a solid thinking player winning. The two middle position, the middle position and hijack were much more recreational, a little bit looser. And then the cutoff was a fairly passive, but I would say decent reg.
Okay. So what did you raise to? I hope you raised.
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah, 210.
So hero raises to 210. Mark, I'm pretty sure this didn't happen, but this would be insane if all of a sudden the under the gun guy 3-bet you.
It's funny you mentioned that. I thought if there is any way that he has pocket aces here,
Yeah.
that may be this might be the time that
I mean, that would be crazy if the under the gun guy 3-bet you. I mean, you wouldn't think that the under the gun guy would just, I mean, if the under the gun guy call, again, it's kind of strange for him to check two straights. I assume under the gun folded.
He did fold.
All right, so UTG folds. Mark goes to 210. Okay.
Middle position now folds.
Okay.
The hijack folds.
Okay.
And the cutoff goes into the tank maybe 20 to 30 seconds and puts in the call.
All right, so the cutoff calls. I mean, he was the third caller. So he was the guy on the flop that checked in position. And then on the turn, it went bet, call, or excuse me, MP bet 35, hijack call, cutoff called. Now hero raises to check raise to 210, UTG folds, MP folds, hijack folds, cutoff calls, closing the action. So you guys have put in 420 plus 70, 490. It's probably just under 600. I think it's 590 in the pot, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right. I mean, you would think that this guy's got to draw here a lot.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm thinking about. As you just mentioned, the fact that he was closing the action on the flop after it got checked to him, I am pretty much ruling out most two pairs in this case. Like if he has ace nine,
No,
ace two.
I think he's leaned towards the draw. The question becomes like, which draw is it?
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
And, you know, you can't always say, well, he would bet a flush draw here. Not necessarily five ways, just because UTG, especially if UTG is checking like almost all of his hands on the flop. If I was up against a guy like that and I was in the cutoff, somehow V-pipped an overcall, like I probably wouldn't be betting many like non-combo diamond types of holdings here. So he can still have a diamond draw. Now, there aren't. So what else is out there for draws? Obviously, backdoor clubs. A sneaky hand here too, Mark, that this guy could have that I might end up having here is like if I had 10-8 suited here, and I'm not talking about even having the flush draw side. I'm talking about like having like some sort of open, I mean, because I'm probably not going to be playing 8-6, 10-8, and then you represent the flush when it comes in. Although you have announced that your hand is pretty strong, so usually you're not in the business in live poker of like trying to move people off of sets. Like if the river comes, you know, like on a backdoor club. But I got to tell you, like if I had 10-8 of spades here and I called and you check raised and then I called and a club came, I would be bluffing it for sure. And then sometimes the thing about going for straight draws on flushing boards is that you'll get paid when you hit your hand and then you can bluff the flush. But anyways, the pot's 590. It's ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, deuce of diamonds, 7 of clubs. Okay.
And the river hits the king of hearts.
Oh, just a total brick, huh?
Absolute brick.
Oh my God, this is a weird spot for you. It's a weird because it's like, it feels like it's just so apparent that his hand is a draw, that you might even make the like. I mean, there are your hand's so strong though, like it's just almost impossible for you not to have the best hand. But there are situations where, and it's usually not, because I usually don't like checking to induce a bluff, but there are situations where if your opponent's range is entirely draws, usually the play is going to be to check. I have another idea for you though here, as opposed to checking. I just think that once you check raise, and then at the end you check, I don't know how many guys are going balls to the wall with a busted out draw, because it just looks like you're check calling so much. But I have an alternative line here, and I've talked about this on the show sometimes too. Could you ever make a stupidly small bet here, like almost to try to induce, like a stupid bet, like 60 or 70, and somehow you might actually also get hero called by like the king high flush draw that missed, that ran into a king. King X of clubs, King X of diamonds, or if he had like some other pair with a flush draw, like 7X of diamonds or something like that. The reason why I'm saying stupid, so again, you could check and you could induce a bluff here, try to induce a bluff, or I might, that doesn't seem to like play out all that well in a lot of cases. I might make a stupid bet and try to induce something. I can't see really betting anything that approaches being, God, maybe even over like 30 or 40% of the pot here. It just doesn't make any sense.
Would you consider going over pot and targeting?
Well, if I didn't think that I was going to bet over 30%, I would not go over pot now. Do you understand why I don't like that though?
Oh, I agree. And
like what are you targeting if you go over pot here?
I would specifically ace X of clubs that, with all of the draws bricking out.
Ace X of clubs. Okay. Ace X of clubs. So you'd have to check back the flop on it with ace, and then have the nut flush draw on the turn. This is why I kind of like, actually, I don't know why I washed over ace X of clubs. I think that this is probably then more, it's probably, I was thinking just king X was possible. Mm-hmm. Then I would probably bet 1/4 the size of the pot here. I think 25 to 30% of the pot would do it. It takes out a possibility of him. It takes out the possibility of him trying to bluff. But I suppose if ace X of clubs is there, like when I wasn't sort of paying attention to ace X of clubs, I was thinking it was going to be a check. But again, like at these stakes, like these spots just don't get, you've announced your hand's getting bluffed like a lot. So that's why I'm not like the huge fan of the check. What did you end up doing here?
I ended up betting 2/3 pot roughly. I went 405.
405.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Trying to get called by ace X of clubs only.
That's primarily what I'm targeting there. Just like I said, because he's not going to have any sets here. He's never going to have two pair. So I think someone in the chat mentioned ace king. He's 3-betting ace king pre-flop. So and again, he can't have ace 7 suited outside of, if you can't have ace, I don't think you can have ace suited at all, ace 7 suited at all. So he couldn't have turned 2 pair.
See, people are saying that they want to bet large because they want you to mark to look like you busted out on a draw. Now that has some credence, but
yeah.
I think what I've been thinking about the whole time though is that this guy is really leaned towards a draw. That has been the overwhelming thing for me. Some people are looking at if people are looking at it like, oh, well, he's got ace X here and he's going to hero call. Okay, but it just seems to me like this guy has got a draw here so much, and that would lean. I guess that makes sense. That you could make a case then that it could be, which which is what some people in the chat originally had said, a check to induce or a very large bet. So I kind of take that back. Again, I don't know how I missed the ace-x of clubs, but you could say, I want to make a large bet to make it look like I've got a draw here that may get called by ace-x of clubs, or I want to check.
Yeah,
So
like
you
if I
went 405.
and I was thinking if I had something like Jack 10 of clubs, 8 6 of clubs, something along those lines, I might make a bet like this where it's, roughly a third of my remaining stack. Where, if I put in half my stack, you might think that I'm gonna call it off no matter what if I'm putting that much at risk. So that's kind of why I went on that sizing.
What did he end up doing?
He tanked for about 2 to 3 minutes and folded.
2 to 3 minutes is a long time.
Yeah.
He really tanked for 2 to 3 minutes?
Yeah.
What is he tanking with here? I don't. Does a guy call a check raise with ace X after checking back the flop and then tank for 2 and 3 minutes on a brick when you go 405? I mean, I suppose it's possible. I guess it's the definition of Fifth Street chicken. The thing about this is that if I'm your opponent here, in this scenario, I don't know if I would fold the river if I called your check raise in this scenario. And I do talk about how you can absolutely fold to river aggression when nothing changes because the bet in itself is change enough. But I don't know in this situation though, because I think I might just fold out on the turn if I think that you're always value heavy. Because I would think that you're going to follow through anyways if you've got nothing. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's a little strange to me. So he folds. You never got a reveal?
Didn't get a reveal. And I mentioned this in the email. I agree, the awkward position to be in on the river just because he's going to have so few value hands that are better than just a single ace. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, in hindsight, was the better play really just a lead turn, hope that with that many people in the field and that draw heavy of a board, somebody was going to make a play and get more money that way.
Yeah, it's weird because I just thought that there's so many different possibilities for this hand. It's an interesting one. It's one of the best non-revealed hands I think that we've had in a long time. Thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Because the reveal doesn't really matter, right? Whether he called or not. Now some people are saying bet smaller. We don't want to be results oriented. All right, let's move on here to the last caller, and this is going to be Justin. Justin is going to be the last caller. Hello, Justin. You're a blast.
Hey, Bard, how are you?
How's it going, Justin? Where are you playing out of?
Good. I'm playing at your favorite place, the Encore Boston Harbor.
And at what game?
This is 2-5.
2-5. So on the podcast for this Thursday, which I'm almost done recording now because I'm going to the Dominican Republic on Wednesday morning, I actually played in a 2-5 that was almost unplayable on Friday, which is so rare. Yeah, because it was I got there really early. They tried to start 5-10. It didn't go. So there were 3 or 4 5-10 regs in the 2-5 game. The other guys were nitty. There was one spot. I ended up going over and playing 5-5 PLO, which was 5-5-10 2000 PLO, which was actually the first time I've played that game at Encore. But usually this game is great. 2-5, 1000 buy-in. And how deep are you?
I am 2000 and the villain is 1500 effective.
So 1500 effective. Okay.
Yep. I do put on the straddle. I am under the gun.
So you straddle.
Yep. And
this is the occasional straddle? Not
yeah, it's an occasional straddle, or it's a very recreational table. Maybe 1 or 2, I'd say, solid thinking players at the table.
Yeah, that's what it's typically is.
But yeah, majority of the table was super recreational. You know what I mean? Everyone was, you know what I mean? Kind of just giving away money. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I put the straddle on, and it folds to middle position, who limps for the $10.
Okay.
It folds back to me, and I look at Ace of Hearts, King of Clubs.
Ace of Hearts, King of Clubs. Okay.
And I decide to raise to 35.
Okay.
And the limper does call.
So your head's up.
Heads up, yep.
So the pot is probably $75. Hero straddles, MP limps, hero goes to 35, MP calls. I would... is that right?
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would just go a little bit larger. People make fun of me. I say I would go to like 40. You're out of position. Chances are he's probably going to limp call. I mean, you might want to keep him in too. So your heads up.
That's what I figured. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I figured. Just keep him in. And just a quick background on this guy. This guy ran up a stack like ridiculously large. He bought him like 400 or 500, and he's got 1,500 in front of him, and he's been playing like really loose, super slow playing his his value like a lot. And at showdown he's super wide. You know what I mean, with crazy 2 pairs, or you know what I mean, 3 of a kind. So anyways, the flop comes 6 of hearts, 5 of diamonds, deuce of clubs.
6 of hearts, 5 of diamonds, deuce of clubs. Okay.
And I decide to check.
Okay.
And the villain does check back.
I actually kind of like that play on a board in this particular situation against these types of players. MP checks behind. A lot of times when I miss with ace king, I don't necessarily bet. And the thing, it obviously it's going to depend on texture, right? Like, I mean, if it's
right.
like, if it's 9-5 deuce and I'm like starting to run a bluff and the turn's a queen, I'm barreling off like in some types of situations. But here, I mean, the only thing that you can make a case for, I guess, would be sometimes getting called by like a worse ace high. I mean, you're never going to get anything better than your hand to fold.
Right.
And it's relatively rare that you would get a weaker hand, I suppose, to call. So I don't mind it. Check. Okay.
Check. Turn is a good one. It is the ace of diamonds.
Okay.
And I decide to bet close to pot. I bet like $50. And villain doesn't take too long before calling.
So hero bets 50 and MP calls. Just go back to the flop here. I suppose you could also make a case for sometimes starting to structure a triple barrel if and getting a guy, I suppose, off of like a small pairs like 7s and 8s and just starting to run cards that come that are overcards, 3s and 4s, things like that. I just wanted to add that of note, but I still think personally I would be checking here a lot. MP check 75, turns the ace of diamonds, hero bets 50. It brings a backdoor diamond out there, so it's 6 of hearts, 5 of diamonds, deuce of clubs. That turns the ace of diamonds, okay? And he calls. Hero bets 50, MP calls. So now the pot is 175.
Yep. And the river is the 6 of clubs.
6 of clubs.
Yep. So I didn't really know how to feel on this card, to be honest with you. I was like kind of unsure. You know what I mean?
So here's what we got going on here. I think this is a really good card for you. Like, I think it's inconsequential for the most part that this is going to really affect anything. Meaning that I don't know, when you start to think about like the hands, like if the guy has a 6 in his hand and you're the pre-flop, I'm talking about on the flop, right? If a guy has a 6 in his hand and you're the pre-flop raiser coming out of the straddle, say he's got like 7-6 or, whatever, even like ace-6 or something like that, and you check, people are going to want to do a lot of betting. They don't want like free cards to come out, right? Because it's just a 6. Like it's like a protection bet.
Right.
So
absolutely.
the fact that he didn't bet on the flop, I think greatly discounts him having a 6. Now, once in a while, a guy might sneak in with a check behind with like 7-6 suited, but that's not usually at 2-5. So if you take out the fact that he has a 6 and he didn't raise the turn, which is going to lessen the fact that he is ever going to have like sets or stuff like that, now you're left with him having a weaker ace than you, right? Because it's 6-5 deuce ace. Or a missed backdoor diamond draw? A missed backdoor diamond draw. Now, what I would tend to say here, though, is that, again, I truly believe this, I would rather just go for the value against something like ace-9 here on the river than check and hope that like queen-jack of diamonds is going to bluff.
Right. I was just going to ask you that too. Like what size would you go if you was to bet the river here? Like, would you just go super, super polar?
Well, I'll get to that in a second. The other reason why, so again, like I'd rather have these guys call. And the other problem with checking here is that it's just a disaster when like ace-9, ace-10 check behind. This is like 2-5 and below type of like theory. So that's why like I just err towards betting, it's the value portion as opposed to like sniffing off a bluff. The last call on live stream was somewhat unique where I sometimes even advocated checking. But here, I don't think the 6 is really anything that's consequential. To be honest with you, like if he's not going to really have busted backdoor diamonds and I'm targeting an ace, I have pretty much the nuts here with ace king. Yeah, you might even make a case for overbetting the pot here when he calls. When he calls on the turn, when the call's in. So it's something that's at least the size of the pot, 175, 200, something like that. Because he's not going to fold an ace now, is he?
I don't think so. I'd like to think no.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's folding an ace. So I do decide to bet here.
Mm-hmm.
I bet 200.
Okay. So hero bets 200.
And villain tanks for a while. And he was like really thinking. And he now announces raise to 750.
750. Wow.
750.
So MP, hold on a second. MP raises to 750. I want to read a comment, which is theoretically correct. Yago. He says that there are some 6s, but not a ton in villain's range and basically none in yours. That is true. So he says, then I wouldn't overbet. Okay. That's fine if you're thinking about like playing it entirely range versus range, but I would make the case that overbetting is going to win the most amount of money against this specific competition when you make these assumptions, when you make these sort of like live node locks in these particular situations. Now, with that being said, I haven't even discussed, so that's why I break the theory sometimes. I haven't discussed this spot. There's a couple of things here that are kind of head scratching. I already talked about how I would have thought that hands like sets would do a lot of raising off on turn, check back flop, right? You come out and you bet on an ace. You'd see a lot of raising and stuff on turn. I suppose it's possible that he could have a 6, although very, very unlikely. If you had said I came out and I bet like 125 and the guy raised me to 350, I would snap call there so fast. It wouldn't even be a second thought. The head scratching thing here is that you've overbet the pot, which tends to decrease your opponent's bluffing frequency because you bet so large, and the fact that it's a river raise, which is so unlikely, which is so underbluffed.
Yeah, this was just like a nasty spot. I took my time with this one, and I was trying to count out combos and stuff.
370,
you know what I mean?
375,
Go ahead.
375 plus 750. So it's 1125, and it's 550 for you to call. So you're getting 2 to 1, right?
Yeah, I was getting a little bit over 2 to 1.
I don't think actually that's not quite as bad as I thought in terms of pot odds here.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just I thought about this for a long time. I asked him plain straight out, and I was like, what do you got? Like 7, 8 of diamonds that you don't raise, but that don't make any sense. That's gonna raise on pre-flop. You know what I mean? That's suited connector. I'm thinking like 7, 8 off or something like that, or maybe like I kind of just drew a blank there. That was the only kind of bluffing hands, or maybe like a king deuce suited.
I'm gonna
like
add
with diamonds.
I'm gonna add one other small thing here that's gonna lean me towards calling. So obviously, river raises are very, very underbluffed at this level. We know that. Somebody raising your overbet is very underbluffed. We know that. The one little thing, though, is that it's the 6 that paired. So I feel like somebody who's sort of like looking at the board, even if they're not necessarily a studied player, he wasn't gonna bluff you on like any other card, but it's a 6. So now like he thinks, oh, well, you don't have a 6, I have a 6, kind of back into like what Yago said, but like kind of 10 steps below, like on a very fundamental, very rudimentary way. And he's like, oh, okay, well, the 6 paired, so I'm going to raise you, right? Like as a bluff. So there's that. Like almost to the point where like if the river was like a 10 or something and he raised you here at the end, I would feel worse about it or like a random,
Right.
I would feel worse about it than if it's a 6, where now he thinks like he's going to raise you because like it's a scare card. That's just a one caveat. 2 to 1, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to fold there.
It was tough for me, Bart. I was really torn, really close to this, and I actually did wind up folding. I just didn't think, a guy like that who's super recreational and doesn't really play a ton. I just didn't think he's capable, of making a big bluff. Actually, he proudly shows over the 7 of hearts and 8 of spades. Yeah,
7 of hearts.
no good.
8 of spades.
Bad
7
fold
of-
on me. Yeah, bad fold on me.
Do you again? It's tough for us to know, but do you understand what I'm saying? Like, do you think that like if the river was a 10, okay, or even if the river was like a deuce, that's probably a better example. Say the river's a deuce, right? Because it's like, okay, it's the same thing in a sense of like you're going to bet for value. I can almost guarantee that he would not have done this. If the river's a 10, if the river's a jack, it's only because the 6 paired.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The top
Absolutely.
pair. So,
It
anyways,
was definitely tough. Definitely tough. But
all right, Justin, thank you
Gotta
for the
live with
call. I appreciate it.
well, thank you so much, Bart. I appreciate it.
All right. All right, guys. Well, that will do it here for us today. Thank you guys very much. Again, I am always looking for new callers, always looking for first-time callers. If you want to get in on the show, you can click on the link in the description, and that will get you information about how to pre-submit your hand. Thank you, everybody in the live chat, for keeping it real.